What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the LV Rated 10 YouTube channel. With football season just right around the corner, a couple weeks away, just got to get through the preseason, I just wanted to kind of go over my predictions on how the AFC West is going to shake down this year. So let's go ahead and let's take a look. So first, as you can see, we're going to go ahead and start off with the Los Angeles Chargers. Last year, they had a record of 11-6, which ended up giving them second in the AFC West. And as we know, they went on to the playoffs and they lost against the Texans, I believe it was. This year, I'm thinking that Justin Herbert is going to continue being their MVP. I can't really see anybody else really doing it. Maybe like someone like Derwin James, possibly. But I'm going to go ahead and say Justin Herbert. But let's go ahead and go back. Obviously, they're head coached by Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh is a really well-known head coach. Obviously, his second year with the Los Angeles Chargers, last year being, of course, last year. So, as we said, Justin Herbert's going to go ahead and get their MVP for this year. That's who I'm saying. Their Offensive Player of the Year, I think Ladd McConkey builds on his absolutely great rookie year, and he continues that. He's going to go ahead and be their best Offensive Player this year. Their Defensive Player is going to be someone different than what most people probably would assume. I would assume most people would say someone like Derwin James or Khalil Mack. I'm going to go with Tuli Tuipulotu. Last year he had the most sacks on a team with Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack. So now that Joey Bosa is gone and everyone's going to be concentrated on Khalil Mack, I think Tuli Tuipulotu, this is his year to go ahead and step up. And it also helps that he's a former USC Trojan, of course. The Rookie of the Year, to me, was a real big toss-up with either Trey Harris or Amarian Hampton. As you can see here, I'm going to go ahead and skip a little bit, but J.K. Dobbins was their biggest loss. He was their leading rusher last year, and they supplemented it with obviously getting and drafting Amarian Hampton in the first round, but talks out of camp are saying that Amarian Hampton's kind of been struggling recently, so I do think that he can be rather impactful being that number one back. Najee Harris being out with an eye injury he suffered during July 4th, so I think Amarian Hampton is really his kind of job to lose at that running back one position as of right now. And then Trey Harris, apparently this guy's been tearing it up in camp so far. Trey Harris is the wide receiver formerly of Ole Miss. And I think that if they can get Trey Harris going, they're going to really enjoy a wide receiver that they've been missing since someone like Keenan Allen. Their biggest addition that they had this offseason was Mekhi Becton. Their offensive line was already really, really good with Rashawn Slater, Joe Alt. Now they bring in Mekhi Becton, who played guard for the Eagles last year during their Super Bowl run, and he really figured it out at the guard position. So I think that entire offensive line is going to be so much better, and it's going to be what exactly Jim Harbaugh wants to do, as he takes his philosophy from Michigan coming over here of running the ball, being really meticulous running the ball, holding the ball, getting a lot of possession, really kind of controlling the game through the run game and the offensive line. As we said, J.K. Dobbins was their leading rusher last year. They lost him, but of course they got Amarian Hampton. And then I'm going to go ahead and just show you guys the win-loss record that I have for them this year. I have them winning week 1 against the Chiefs in Brazil. I think that this could possibly be a toss-up game because the Chiefs always seem to dig out a win in week 1 whenever it's like a primetime kind of game like that. And then being in Brazil, that's a primetime game. So this is kind of a toss-up, but I do have the Chargers beating them. I have them losing against the Raiders. I have them splitting against the Raiders this year, and so I got them losing against them, and then losing against the Broncos in week 3. I think the Broncos are a possible dark horse to take over this AFC West from the Chiefs this past couple of seasons, and I think their defense has just gotten really good. We'll go ahead and get over to them once we get over on their prediction. I have them winning against the Giants. The Giants are still a struggling team. The Commanders, I think they continue to build off of the last year Jaden Daniels season and going to the NFC Championship game. So I think the Commanders are a very good team, and they lose against the Commanders. The Dolphins are struggling. They get a win there. The Colts are struggling. They'll get a win there too. The Vikings, obviously they have a brand new quarterback coming in J.J. McCarthy. He, of course, was in the building last year, but suffered the ACL tear in preseason last season. And I think that if he can be basically what everyone thinks he can be and get J.J. McCarthy to produce what Sam Darnold was doing last year, I think that the sky's the limit for this Vikings team. Honestly, I think this Vikings team is going to be very good in the NFC this upcoming year. The Titans, of course, had the number 1 overall pick, and they're still a struggling team, so they're going to go ahead and get a win there. The Steelers, they just seem kind of dysfunctional this year. I'm not super impressed with Aaron Rodgers in his old age, if I'm being honest. I know he put up a lot of stats last year in New York, but I just don't see it. So I'm going to have them win against the Steelers. The Jaguars have a lot to figure out as well. I can see them winning against the Jaguars. I just don't think that the Jaguars roster stacks up to what the Chargers have currently. Of course, the bye, and then they split, like I said, against the Raiders. So they're going to go ahead and get the win against the Raiders in LA. The Eagles are the team to beat in the NFL this year. I think the Eagles have the best roster in the NFL. So they're not going to get a win against the Eagles. And then they split against the Chiefs. They won in Brazil. They got their one, which should be a home game for the Chargers in Brazil. And then they go to Arrowhead and they lose against the Chiefs. This is where the Chiefs kind of turn it on late in the year. 4 games remaining in the season. That's just where the Chiefs kind of turn it up. So I see them losing to the Chiefs. The Cowboys, I have them winning against the Cowboys. The Cowboys just seem all types of dysfunctional this offseason. Micah Parsons wants out. Their head coaching search was a disaster. Dak Prescott is still up in the air on if he's a good quarterback or not, like every single year. And so I'm not sure about the Cowboys this season. They're either the best regular season team or they're the worst regular season team. So there's no in between with the Cowboys, but I think that they go ahead and continue being pretty bad. So I think the Cowboys are going to get a loss here. The Texans are a very good team as well. They're going to be vying for a playoff spot around this time against the Texans, Broncos, Cowboys area here. So I think that the Texans are going to go ahead and take advantage of that. They're a very good team as well. So I'm going to go ahead and take a loss against the Texans. And then they're going to get a win against the Broncos to end out the year. And most likely get them into a playoff spot, which leaves them with a 10-7 record. And then they split in the AFC West 3-3. All right, let's go ahead and go over to the Kansas City Chiefs. They're obviously coached by head coach Andy Reid, one of the best in the NFL these past couple years, basically his whole tenure in the NFL. But last year they had a 15-2 record, which got them first in the AFC West. First of all, I just want to say, Chiefs, get your schedule principle better. This is terrible. This is just a Microsoft Office, Microsoft Word table. Like, this is terrible. The Broncos, the Chargers, the Raiders all have good printables. I don't know what the Chiefs are doing here. Anyway, I think Patrick Mahomes continues to be their MVP. That's kind of just a given. Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback possibly in the NFL, and he's continued to show that ever since he stepped on the field as a Kansas City Chief. So he continues being their MVP. Offensive Player of the Year, I have Xavier Worthy taking a huge step this year. Again, we're going to go ahead and go over to this biggest loss. Rashee Rice is going to be out for a couple of games because of all legal issues and the pending legal troubles that he has. So I think this is where they're going to get the Xavier Worthy that they were vying for when they drafted him just a few seasons ago. And so I think Xavier Worthy is going to take off this year. That's going to be my Offensive Player of the Year. Defensive Player of the Year, you can easily go Chris Jones here. I have Trent McDuffie solidified himself as one of the top cornerbacks in the league. Like I said, if you want to go Chris Jones, there's no problem with that. I did have Chris Jones, slash Chris Jones on for Defensive Player of the Year, but I feel like Trent McDuffie is really going to solidify himself even more being a top corner in this league. Rookie of the Year, I have Jeffrey Bossa and Jalen Royals. The reason why I have two here is because I feel like Jeffrey Bossa is a really good talent. And then Jalen Royals is kind of the same thing that I was thinking with Xavier Worthy. The Chiefs, as of recent, have been kind of struggling finding wide receiver help, but obviously when you have Patrick Mahomes and he can kind of just deliver to whoever, you don't need a top-tier number one in the NFL type receiver, of course. But it's kind of the same thought that I had with Xavier Worthy, with their top number one receiver going to be out for a little bit in Rashee Rice. I think if Jalen Royals, who I was pretty decently high on in this past draft, can really make a name for himself in that wide receiver room, which we know is not great, I think that he can get something going offensively this year with, of course, Patrick Mahomes feeding him the ball. Their biggest addition, their free agency wasn't crazy or anything. They kind of just kept a lot of their guys and didn't really lose a lot of people either. But their biggest addition for sure was Trey Smith, which is a re-signing of their offensive guard that they had this past season. It was basically set in stone that Trey Smith was going to get paid and that the Kansas City Chiefs weren't going to be able to retain him. They were able to get him back, and I think Chiefs fans everywhere are going to be extremely happy with making sure that their franchise quarterback, Patrick Mahomes, is staying upright this year. Their biggest loss is Rashee Rice this year. He's going to be out for a couple of weeks, and I don't think he's just going to get that momentum, especially when predicting Xavier Worthy and Jalen Rhodes to have pretty decent seasons at the very least. And then let's go ahead and go over schedule. Let's go over their schedule. So I have them losing to the Chargers, of course, as you've seen, in Brazil. I have them losing to the Chargers, and then they play in a Super Bowl rematch week number 2 against the Eagles, which I have them losing. The Eagles, like I said, against the Chargers are the number 1 team in the NFL to beat this year, and I just don't think they get it. I have them winning against the Giants team that obviously is still struggling. Against the Ravens, I have them winning because I think they bounce back after losing against a good team in the Eagles, and they show their dominance of who they've been these past couple years and beat the Ravens. Of course, they're going to go ahead and beat the Jaguars. I think that the Jaguars, like I said, are still struggling, trying to figure out their identity offensively, a new head coach. So I think they win against the Jaguars. Against the Lions, this is going to be a really good game, I think. I have them winning against the Lions. The Lions, of course, are a very good team as well in the NFL. They're a top team in the NFC. I just think that they had too many subtractions in their coaching staff this year. I have them losing against the Raiders at home. For whatever reason, the Raiders just seem to play better in Arrowhead than they do at home. And I think that this Raiders team is much different than Raiders teams that we've seen in the past. They show the fight, but then they can't get it done. That's what the Raiders have been kind of recently. So I think that here we're going to go ahead and see a Raiders win. The Commanders, I have them winning against. The Commanders did have a good year last year, but I think that the Chiefs are still just a little bit higher of a tier of a team than the Commanders are currently. The Bills. So the Bills always seem to have the Chiefs number during the regular season, but then when they meet up in the playoffs, the Bills can never get over the Chiefs hump. So I think the Bills continue that trend in the regular season, beating them in the regular season, and they're going to go ahead and lose against the Bills. Then they come back after the bye week against the Broncos, and they have a win against the Broncos. Like I said, I think the Broncos are a dark horse to possibly win this division, but that is yet to be seen. So as of right now, it's still the Chiefs division to be lost, and they're going to go ahead and get a win against the Broncos. The Colts are still trying to figure out their team. Like we said, they're going to get a win against the Colts. The Cowboys, same thing. Still trying to figure out coaching staff, personnel, and stuff like that. I think that they get a win against the Cowboys. The Texans, I think this is going to be another really good game. The Texans are a very good team. I think CJ Stroud had a not CJ Stroud season last year, and I don't think we see that again. I think they figure it out this year. I think they figure out their offensive blocking scheme because he was pressured a ton last year, and I think the Texans are going to be a very good AFC team. So I have them losing against the Texans, and then winning out the rest of the year against the Chargers, Titans, Broncos, and Raiders. 3 big division wins here at the end of the year, and then the Titans. Like I said, this division is the Chiefs to lose until said otherwise. I think they show their dominance, what they've continued to show over the AFC West, and they go ahead and basically win the AFC West in these last 4 weeks of this year. So I have them going 12-5 with a 4-2 record in the AFC West. Let's go over to the Denver Broncos. They had a 10-7 record last year, which was good for 3rd in the AFC West. They're of course head coached by Sean Payton, formerly of the New Orleans Saints. He's been with the Broncos for a couple of seasons, of course. Really figured it out this past year with the addition of Bo Nix and his emergence as a quarterback for him. But I think their MVP this year is going to be Patrick Surtain. He's the best corner in the NFL. I think that's not a hot take. He is the leader of what I think is going to possibly be the best defense in the NFL this year. So he's going to be the MVP, and he's the most well-renowned Bronco, I think, as of right now. Their offensive player of the year is going to be Courtland Sutton. I think Courtland Sutton has been kind of underrated, mainly because of all the injuries he's sustained so far throughout his career. But he just got a bag. I believe it was this offseason, might have been last. He just got a bag recently, and I think Courtland Sutton shows why he got a lot of money from the Broncos to be that number 1 wide receiver for a young quarterback, for a relatively young team as well. trying to make their name in the AFC and in the AFC West, who kind of emerged last year. So I think that Courtland Sutton is going to continue being that leader of that offense as far as receiving wise, and he's going to be their offensive player of the year. Defensive player of the year, same thing. They have a really, really good defense all around. You could really pick somebody else being their defensive player of the year, and I have no problem with it. But I'm going to continue being on the Patrick Surtain train. I think, like I said, he's the best cornerback in the NFL. He's going to be their defensive player of the year. I don't think that's crazy to say. Rookie of the year, I have Jahdae Barron, another corner that they picked up in this past year's draft. Jahdae Barron out of Texas. We were really high on, if you watched a bunch of our pre-draft, if you watched any of our pre-draft lives and shows and anything like that, you know that we were high on Jahdae Barron. I know Rundown and Jay were high on Jahdae Barron, so the fact that he goes to an already stacked defense in the Denver Broncos, where he has Patrick Surtain on the opposite side of him, it's only going to make, he's going to be covering their second best wide receiver on any team any given Sunday. So I think he has the possibility of being a really, really good talent for this Broncos team. Sadly, obviously, because they're in the Raiders division, but I think Jahdae Barron is going to be their rookie of the year this year. You could just as easily say Troy Franklin as well, reuniting with Bo Nix from their Oregon days, but I think Jahdae Barron is a better talent. Their biggest addition, of course, is going to be on their defensive side of the ball. They had two huge signings in Dre Greenlaw and Talanoa Hufanga from the 49ers. They both are really, really good players. Dre Greenlaw was having a Pro Bowl, All-Pro type season 2 years ago before getting injured in the Super Bowl. This past year, he played a couple of games, but he was still recovering from that injury that he sustained in the Super Bowl. And then Talanoa Hufanga has been one of the better safeties in the NFL since he's started playing for the 49ers, and then now he signs with the Denver Broncos, where he continues to be on a really good defense. So those are the biggest additions for the Broncos. The biggest loss is their second leading tackler in Cody Barton, and then their leading rusher from last season in Javonte Williams. I believe that the Denver Broncos running game is going to be pretty soft this year. They don't really have, in my opinion, like a number one back to really tilt the rock. It's been, and it's going to continue to be a running back by committee type of thing. And I think that Javonte Williams had, they were waiting for him to really pop off. I know last year that a bunch of fantasy predictions were saying that Javonte Williams that was going to be his year last year, but it just never really shook out. They decided to not re-sign him, and so I think that their running game is going to kind of suffer because of it. And then let's go ahead and go over to their prediction, their schedule prediction. I have them winning week 1 against the Titans here, winning week 2 against the Colts. They started off with 2 easy wins. The Titans and the Colts are still, like we've been saying, trying to figure things out. Week 3, I think they get a win against the Chargers. Like I've been saying, I think this Broncos team, their defense is going to really take them as far as they're going to go this year. And then they're going to go ahead and get a win against the Bengals. Same thing, like I said, the Bengals have a hard time protecting Joe Burrow, and that's been really evident, especially last year. And I just don't think they did enough to really solidify their defensive front. Zach Allen just got a huge bag, the defensive tackle for the Broncos, and he's been really good. The Bengals have, like I said, a hard time defending Joe Burrow. So if they can get to Joe Burrow, create some pressure, make him have to make quick decisions, they still have Pat Surtain, Jahdae Barron, Dre Greenlaw, Hufanga. The names go on and on. So I think they get a win against the Bengals. And then, like we've been saying, the Eagles, best team in the NFL. I think they get a loss against the Eagles. The Eagles have the best roster in the league. They're going to go ahead and just fall against the Eagles. They're going to get a win against the Jets. The Jets, brand new coaching staff, brand new quarterback, brand new philosophy. This is their first year and still trying to rebuild their name and kind of heal after their Aaron Rodgers experiment. So they get a win against the Jets. Going to get a win against the Giants. The Giants are still trying to figure things out as well. Relatively young team over there. Very excited to watch them though, but still a young team. They get a W. Like we've been saying against the Cowboys, they're either going to be really good or really bad, and I have them just being pretty decently bad this year. So they're going to get a win against the Cowboys. The Texans, like I've been saying, I think that this is going to be a bounce back year for CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud did not have a really good year last year, but I think he bounced back. And against a really good team in the Broncos, I think he's going to show it. And they're going to get a loss against the Broncos. They're going to get a win against the Raiders. Then against the Chiefs, they're going to get a loss against the Chiefs. The Chiefs, like we've been saying, this is their division to lose, really. They're going to lose against the Commanders. I really believe in the Commanders. This is later in the year, just the last couple of games, as you can see here. And I think the Commanders are going to really figure it out at this point in time. And they're going to get a loss here. And then I think they come back and they beat the Raiders again. I think the Broncos defense is just insane. And I think they get a win against the Raiders again. The Green Bay Packers. The Green Bay Packers are a really underrated team in the NFL this year. I think that if they can really establish their run and Jordan Love can figure out his combination of receivers that he likes, I think they're going to be an extremely dangerous offense, even for a Broncos defense that we know and I'm predicting to be possibly the best in the NFL. But I do think that the Green Bay Packers edge them out and they end up losing against the Packers. They're going to go ahead and end up winning against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think the Jaguars are, like I said before, still trying to figure things out. New head coach, new players on that team. Trevor Lawrence still needs to figure things out. So I think they end up winning against the Jaguars. And then they're going to end up with 2 losses against division rivals in the Chiefs and the Chargers. Division games are really a toss-up, honestly. It can be really anybody. So I think that the Chiefs are going to continue their trend in being the best in the AFC West. And they'll end up losing there. And then the Chargers, they're really going to be fighting for a playoff game here. So that last Week 18 Chargers game is really going to be a toss-up. But I do have the Broncos beating the Chargers. I think their roster is just a tad better than the Chargers as of right now. So that ends up giving them a 10-7 record and then splitting overall in the AFC West with a 3-3 record in the AFC West. And then the Las Vegas Raiders. 2024, of course, was not very good to the Raiders. 4-13 record, which got them 4th in the AFC West. Brand new head coach, though. We got Pete Carroll, so that's very exciting. I know everybody in Raider Nation was excited for that. But I have their MVP, of course, be Max Crosby. Max Crosby is top defensive player in the NFL. Last year he was injured, and I think this year has a different type of hunger to him. I think this is the year Max Crosby is going to get real close to getting that defensive player of the year. He was close just a couple seasons ago, but I think this is the year that he's going to make an argument for that defensive player of the year, in my opinion. Offensive player of the year is none other than Ashton Jeanty. Ashton Jeanty, of course, the number 6 overall pick from this past season. A really, really great running back, and the Raiders running game last season was not good whatsoever. Combination of Zamir White, Amir Abdullah, Sincere McCormick, Alexander Madison just did not get the job done at all. And so I think solidifying that running back position, especially with a team that needed it, and the Raiders, is going to be huge for the Raiders this year. So he's going to be the offensive player of the year. Defensive player of the year, of course, Max Crosby. That's an easy one, but my dark horse is going to be Malcolm Koonce. If Max Crosby is going to get doubled like he always does, I think we've been waiting for that emergence of the other side edge. Whether it had been Malcolm Koonce, like we seen 2 years ago, or if it was Tyree Wilson, but I just don't think the Tyree Wilson thing is going to happen. So if we're going to see what Malcolm Koonce had the possibility of doing just 2 seasons ago, and we get a full season of healthy Malcolm Koonce, just like he was going to be a budding superstar last year before getting injured, I think Malcolm Koonce could be the Raiders' dark horse defensive player of this year. And then a rookie of the year, it's easy to say Ashton Jeanty, of course. I kind of just wanted to say someone different, and that's going to be Dante Thornton. Dante Thornton has been on an absolute tear in camp this year. He's been running with the ones basically every single time. He's been first team offense. I think he's the number 2 wide receiver on the depth chart right now. He's 6'5", runs a sub 4.4. He is just an absolute specimen of a player. And I think if Geno Smith can really connect with Dante Thornton, like, he can be someone like a DK Metcalf that we've been waiting for, a really explosive wide receiver 1 type guy. The biggest addition by far has been Geno Smith. The Raiders really needed to solidify that quarterback position. They had Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew last year, and they did not do well whatsoever. Of course, the Raiders had a 4-13 record. They did not do well. They had a bunch of turnover problems. I know that was Geno Smith's kind of issue last year as well. He had quite a bit of turnovers, but I think that gets toned down quite a bit this year with a really good run game. He's not going to have to pass the ball a ton, especially in the red zone, where a lot of his turnovers did happen last season in Seattle. So I think Geno Smith is a huge addition, and just watching him in person a couple of times, going into camp and the simulated game, I think Geno Smith looks awesome so far. So I'm really excited to see what he can bring to this Raiders offense. Their biggest loss is just recent in Christian Wilkins. Although we didn't know whether or not Christian Wilkins was going to play the entirety of the season, if he was going to be ready for week 1, I think the talent of Christian Wilkins alone and the loss of him is pretty significant. And then just recently, as of yesterday, the Raiders just traded Jacorian Bennett for a defensive tackle from the Eagles. So either that means that we are extremely not confident with the defensive tackles that we have currently, that we needed to bring in another body, or that just means that they didn't like Jacorian Bennett as a player on this defense. I think it's the lack of depth that we had at the defensive tackle position as of right now. So I think that just shows that how significant of a loss that Christian Wilkins is right now. So let's go ahead and go through their schedule. I have them winning week 1 against the Patriots. I think the Patriots are still a rather newly constructed team. They're not a young team, they're a newly constructed team because they basically won the offseason. They brought in a bunch of different veterans to supplement their relatively young team from last year. And I think that they're still going to try to figure it out. Their personnel, I think they're going to have a decent year this year, but I just think that this Raiders team and the combination of being coached by Pete Carroll is going to just be able to edge them out for a win in week 1. Week 2, this is the game that a lot of Raiders fans, and I know a lot of people have scheduled, is this week 2. Pete Carroll versus John Harbaugh. They have a significant past coaching in the Pac-10, coaching in the NFC West, and now coaching in the AFC West. So I think that this is a significant game to kind of really show the world on Monday Night Football how this Raiders team is going to be different for this year. So I think they get a win against the Chargers on Monday night. Then they go to the Commanders in Washington, D.C. And the Commanders have a really good team. Went to the NFC Championship game last year. They're going to get a loss against the Commanders. The Bears, I think, have a really good team. And they have a really good coaching staff. But I think this is early enough in the year where they're still going to try to figure things out. They're not going to be clicking, and they're just going to need a little bit more time to kind of figure out their team. So I do have the Raiders winning against the Bears. The Colts, the Raiders are just a better constructed team at this time. They have a better roster in my opinion. And is the same thing with the Titans. The Colts and Titans, I see them getting wins. And then the Chiefs, like I was saying in the Chiefs preview, the Raiders just play better in Arrowhead for whatever reason. So I have them winning against the Chiefs. Then they go into a bye. This game right here against the Jaguars, I really teeter-tottered with this entire time I was looking at this, because the Raiders have a bad history of coming off the bye and being really flat coming off of the bye. So I have them winning against the Jaguars because I believe that they should win against the Jaguars. But if you tell me that they end up dropping this game against the Jags, I would not be surprised. And then they go to the Broncos, and like I said, the defense for the Denver Broncos is just insane. So I have them losing against the Broncos. I have them winning on Monday night against the Cowboys. Like we said, against every other AFC West team for the Cowboys, I think that they're still going to have to try and figure things out, what they want to be as a team in totality. So I think that the Raiders get a win against the Cowboys. Against the Browns just seem like they're all over the place besides, Myles Garrett. They have no real position at the quarterback. Their running back they just drafted has legal issues already. So I think that the Raiders do end up winning against the Browns here. And then I have the Raiders losing against the Chargers in SoFi For whatever reason, the Chargers can't seem to squeak out a win in SoFi with fans, apparently, I guess, because they have gotten a win again in SoFi, but it was not in front of fans. I think that although this is going to be a close game, I think Jim Harbaugh gets his revenge on Pete Carroll and the Chargers squeak out a win. And it's going to be a very close game, though. And then again with the Broncos, same thing. The Broncos defense, like we've been saying, I think going to possibly be the best in the NFL. So the Broncos, they're going to get a loss here against the Broncos. The Eagles, we've been saying this, the best team possibly in the NFL, the team to beat, Super Bowl defending champions. They have to go to Philadelphia in mid-December. So I just think that's not a really good recipe for a Raiders win here. And I think the Eagles win there. Against the Texans, like I've been saying as well, CJ Stroud is going to have a bounce back year. The Texans are a very good team. They're a very solid team overall. And I think traveling from Philly, traveling again to Houston, and playing two good teams back to back, I don't see it. So I'm going to have them losing against the Texans here. But they come back home against the Giants, against a team that is still figuring out their identity as well. And I think they get a win against the New York Giants at home. And then this game against the Chiefs, I think this is going to be for a playoff spot for the Raiders. I have them dropping here, but again, just like the Jaguars game, I was extremely teeter-tottering on whether or not they beat the Chiefs, because I think if the Chiefs already solidified their AFC West position, they're probably going to do the same thing that they did with the Broncos last year. They sat all their starters, and the Broncos won that game, and that kind of pushed them into the playoffs. This is kind of a back-and-forth game. I do have them losing, but that's in my mind if all the starters for both teams play. So. But there you go. There was my AFC West season predictions. That's how I believe the AFC West is going to shake down. I believe through the predictions that I had and the records and the AFC West predictions, I believe that I have the Chiefs being first in the AFC West, so they take the AFC West division crown again. And then the Chargers and Broncos are going to be tied with a record of 10-7 and splitting in the AFC West at 3-3, so they're going to be tied for second/third. And then the Raiders are going to have a record of 10-7 as well, but going to be 2-4 in the division, which ends up getting them fourth. But I do believe that they end up sneaking into a wild card spot. So basically that means that the AFC West, in my opinion, is going to be a bloodbath, 1, and 2 is going to have every single team represented in the playoffs. So, but let me know what you guys think. What did I get right? What did I get wrong? Who do you guys have winning the AFC West this year? And what is your guys' schedule prediction for each of these teams? Let me know down in the comments below. Thank you guys. Thank you, Raider Nation. Just win, baby.